Do you have a favorite?
Not meant to. But mostly the unloved ones. The unvisited ones. The cases that get dusty and ignored. All the broken and shunned creatures. Someone's got to care for them. Who shall it be if not us?
Yes.
Welcome to Rune Soup, a weekly podcast about magic, culture, and the very best new and old ideas for living in this world. Coming to you from 43 degrees south on a small farm in deepest Tasmania. My name is Gordon, and I shall be your host. This week, I am very happy to reintroduce two people who definitely do not need reintroduction. Peter Gray and Alkistis Dimech of Scarlet Imprint. Peter and Alkistis join us today to talk about their latest book, Brazen Vessel, and the subjects it raises and explores. Enjoy. Peter and Alkistis, welcome back.
Hey, Gordon.
Hey, Gordon. Good to be back.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, congratulations on the new book, which is the topic of our discussion. And I saw and became very jealous on social media. You were fresh back from London from the launch. So how was that?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was a really nice. It felt like a family gathering because there were so many people there we've known since we started. So it had a really wonderful atmosphere. Yeah, Treadwell's are a great host. Christina's, really good at putting on a party and yeah.
And it's a family affair because your family was actually there. I watched the video.
Yeah. Half an hour before it was due to start, I got a message from my sister, and it was a picture of her outside Treadwell's. So
I love it.
I was in a restaurant close by, and I just kind of like ran down the road. And I was like, stay, wait, what are you doing here? And I was running up to her, and my parents were behind her, and I was just like, I just went cold. Like, what are they doing here? This is not planned. I have to put you on the list, and all that. I sort of went into panic mode, and like, how do I get them in? What are they doing?
Did they intend to surprise you, or was it just by happenstance that they were in London at the same time? They weren't.
No. It was all cooked up.
Okay, I like it.
Themselves. Yeah, it was wonderful because they were so much a part of Scarlet becoming what it became or has become, because they supported us when we were completely at the beginning, and because publishing isn't really very financially lucrative, they enabled us to take risks and to publish work that we just believed in without it having any sort of necessity to do anything other than cover costs. So we stayed with them and didn't have to worry about rent, and they also posted books for us when we were away in the Alps. So they're really like sort of part of the invisible Scarlet team.
That's excellent. Yeah, we were talking about our mutual friend Jay before we hit the record button, and he was at the launch. We were sort of chatting about it as it happened. And he said he's deeply inspired by the story and the fact that the jump that you guys made in the midst of the most severe recession in 70 years, a decade ago or whatever it was. So it's quite the journey.
I guess I didn't really think about it. I mean, I came from a background even more precarious than that. But Peter gave up everything pretty much to be with me and to do Scarlet. So I guess for him, it was a different experience. You were used to being independent, so you had to come and live with my family and just take so many risks.
Yeah, I mean, I stepped out of like kind of corporate like media job world when I was kind of pretty much at the peak of like where my career had got to. So I walked away from a pretty good salary to an impossibly precarious publishing position. And as Alkistis said, everyone thinks that you've been an overnight success, but it took us 7 years to even be able to pay rent with the work that we were doing with Scarlet. So it's been intense, but that's part of the formula of Babalon. It's like you have to put everything into the cup, and Scarlet from the beginning has been about that. It's been about taking that risk, about putting everything on red, and that's what we continue to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it pays off. I mean, let's talk about the latest, because I want to, you talk about Scarlet Imprint, and we talk about a very sort of third mind production. So tell us about why the title for this. What is it, and why the title of this latest book?
Okay, it's our collected works from the first public presentation we did after the Red Goddess was released, until the latest thing, which was in Berlin, when we spoke together again on Babalon. So that's a 10-year period, and it's selected works, not absolutely everything, but a lot of material from that time, including things relating to performance, as well as talks in front of different audiences, and things just written and never published. So it was bringing it together. We realized quite how much we've covered, and also the continuities and the way our work interacts with each other. And the title, there's something brazen about it, so it's a bit like a play on being shameless. And the other side is because of the Brazen Vessel of Solomon, and at the heart of the book is the Livre des Esprits and some work on working with spirit. So actually at the heart of Scarlet Imprint is spirit contact and this developing relationships with different classes of spirits. So the book itself is supposed to function also as a grimoire, as well as a material that sort of conveys our process and our researches into these areas.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I remember the last night or so before I left London, we were out drinking, and you were talking through how there's a real third mind component to Scarlet Imprint when you guys are creating. And I found, as I was reading through the book, a couple of the chapters, I'm going, Alkistis, I quite agree. And then there'll be a moment in that particular chapter that makes it clear that it's in fact a Peter one. And I'm like, oh shit. And that happened, it happened more in that direction, but I'm like, wow. And this is towards the end of the book, so it's sort of not exactly chronological, but it's quite chronological. And I'm like, wow, there was, and it just reminded me of the third mind component that whilst you're two of my favorite voices in the field, obviously, but there are moments where there's the Scarlet Imprint voice, and that's sort of there in Brazen Vessel. And I definitely want to talk about Livre des Esprits, but while we're still talking about the book as object, I would like to talk about the cover, Alkistis.
Yeah, which one? The hardback or the paperback?
Paperback. I think you know which one.
We talked to Peter about that. I tried to get him on the cover, but he wasn't having it. The picture, that's. I wanted to do a sort of an abstract thing with no faces, but Peter was insistent on a photograph, and that was the one. It was actually from a session of work I was doing when I was developing the dance on Colette Peignot. So it's a piece relating to the Colette Peignot dances. So I look at it and I don't really see me. I see a particular encounter with work and spirit there. But nice. It was, it is kind of, I guess it's part of what we do. It's sort of expressive of the importance of the body and of being there in the flesh, but also that otherness about it, that it's not necessarily you who's inhabiting the body, or there's this going beyond oneself. So something that I think is expressed through a lot of our work in different ways.
It's really well done, because I mean, as you say, there's a component to the title of brashness and bravery, because to be brazen, right? And it must be a spin out having. I mean, you're in publishing and have been for the last decade, but now you're not in a book; you are on a book. That's that's cool.
So weird.
Yeah.
It was really working on it initially was very hard, but in the end, I was like, oh, who's this Dimech? When you start ranting about authors and their tics and things, and I was thinking about myself more in the third person and Peter, how can you get rid of this annoying tic that Dimech has?
Yeah, so high maintenance. She keeps emailing. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the end, you get very impersonal about it and just kind of ruthless and see your work, and you also realize. I had this feeling as well, because it's over 10 years and I got dropped in this. Peter was already writing, and I hadn't done very much. So I sort of learned on the go, and it shows a lot of development, really. My early stuff is quite raw. But I also felt there was something to be honest about this sense of process, that we're not finished beings, and that it's also important to put this in front of people so that they can see that there is a pathway through things, and you can get deeper or you can go in different directions. And what else? Yeah, it feels like different people sometimes have been writing. You kind of cast off skins when you've written something, and then it stops being you. And I think Peter's found this too with his writing, that once you've written something, it stops being yours, or stops being you even. It becomes its own thing in the world, and and the chemistry that it makes with whoever reads it becomes the important thing. So some people go, yeah, and some people go, oh. or it inspires people, or it takes them off in their own directions. And I think writing should stand like that as well. I think it needs to stand on its own.
Well, I think that's keenly observed, because I'd read some of the stuff, obviously, that's in the book already, because it's a collection of stuff you guys have done at different events and published and what have you. And it was really interesting to re-encounter something that I maybe read 4 or 5 years ago, and it be a different thing, and not have the freshness of either you or Peter on it, and be its own thing, and for me to encounter it in a different context and get more out of it. It's it's eerie in that way. The book is a collection of encounters, and you mentioned Livre des Esprits. This is one I wanted to speak about to begin with. Like, okay, what is that, and why is it important?
It's a 16th century French grimoire that's in a Cambridge manuscript, and it's important because it's very similar to the Megaton or the Lesser Key, the first book, the Ars Goetia, and except that it has the head and the 4 kings, which are cut out of that. So it makes, if you kind of put them together, you realize that there's actually a chain of command and a sort of spatial and, the sort of the court appears. Whereas before, in just the grimoires we have from Veya or Ars Goetia, you don't have that. You have simply this kind of rather chaotic, jumble of spirits of all different kinds, and no explanation, no sense of. There are clues embedded in spirit descriptions and within those books, but not actually the way you access and command them.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty clear now from the manuscript sources that the Goetia is missing that critical ruling trinity of Lucifer, Beelzebub, Satan. But Livre des Esprits is the smoking gun in that it actually has those spirits and it has those spirit descriptions intact. So in terms of our own work, in terms of being able to work with, I mean, the Megaton's kind of, the major grimoire text that we personally engage with. So being able to put the head back on it is a really critical part of this kind of recovery of the grimoire tradition that we've all been engaged in for the last 10 years. So Livre is a very exciting book, and this is the first translation. Alkistis translated it from the French, and it's quite a difficult old French. So although translating French in itself isn't difficult, translating Old French brings up quite a few issues in terms of trying to trace down some of the archaic usages of words. So we had a lot of fun kind of like working through that and finding ways to bring the spirits through. And I think it's a really nice, it's a nice little grimoire.
I think this is very important because the spirit list itself is in Old French, but the conjurations, which aren't in the book, that go with it, are in Latin or ecclesiastical Latin, late Latin. So you have a grimoire that's also standing in between the vernacularization of grimoires, the sort of dispersal through, like, not just a learned class, but towards the vernacular. And I think that's interesting too, because that's been the process that's been, I guess, with the Bibliothèque Bleue, more and more the direction that grimoires have been going in. So a lot of Peter's work will be looking at this in praxis as well, and working with Lucifer as the spirit you command through, rather than going through a sort of Christian route. This text was very useful for us in building that spirit relationship.
So you can have which is, I would say, necessary, but you can have a hierarchy that's uncoupled from Christianity.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's a leading question for you, Peter. Can kings be non-physical?
Yeah, this is the critical thing. Looking at like the David Graeber material,
And Marshall Salins.
and Marshall Salins in their text on kings, which has been a hugely important anthropological text that I'm not sure has got a lot of exposure in the occult world.
And it's free online. I mean, I have the physical copy as well, but it's not even pirated. The whole thing is available online for free. So if people are listening to this, on Kings, David Graeber.
Yeah. So Graeber talks about how there are kings in heaven before there are kings on earth. So Graeber's concerned with, as a left-wing thinker, he's concerned with tyranny, he's concerned with democracy. And when he looked at relatively egalitarian, I know that's problematic, but egalitarian hunter-gatherer societies, and he found that there were many societies in which kings existed in the other world, but there were no kings on earth in terms of like direct kingship. So I look in one of the later essays at this difficulty when kings cross the bounder from spirit into flesh, and you get living kings who enact tyranny rather than kings in the heavens who one appeals to, and that solves. That understanding solves kind of like one of the issues for people who are concerned about ideas around hierarchy and ideas about how one works magic.
It's almost like a human monarch is a dysfunction of the universe, or a dysfunction of the cosmos. Like that office or role belongs in the invisible or the non-physical. It doesn't belong in a fat guy on a throne.
Yeah. So I was really. Yeah, I was delighted. I've been waiting for that text to come out for Graeber for a long time, and that came out just at a perfect juncture. So very excited with that.
Yeah. If we a couple of things you're mentioning about Livitus Esprit there. So the spirit list is in the contemporaneous vernacular, so an old French to us now. The conjurations are in a late Church Latin. Yeah. And now we have a kind of there's two things about that. As you say, that's a vernacularization of contact with, quote unquote, list grimoire spirits in the European tradition. But it does also indicate that at least that far back that there are some structural requirements that are retained, which is we may infer that whoever wrote that list in presumably his native French obviously also wouldn't dream of changing the invocations out of Latin yet. So is that kind of a fair, Livitus Esprit is fascinating for it. The opportunity to restore a hierarchy that kind of plugs everything back into the wall. But is it also interesting to us in the sense of hang on, there are some things that we also shouldn't give back because they may be required to get it to work, and we should probably try it that way before trying it without? What do you think?
Yeah, Julia would kill me if I didn't say yes. Yeah, certainly. Magic is predicated on some discrete and fairly simple structures, and spirit work is as well. And when you start to identify those structures and the way in which magic works, then everything becomes a lot clearer in terms of the grimoire tradition and working with the grimoires. There are ways of doing things in magic.
I think magic is inherently very conservative, but at the same time, it's also innovating all the time. I can't speak English. Sorry. It's also continuously innovating. So you have these strange and also amassing. It also looks across all the time. What are they doing, and is that working? And so you get a very strange combination in magic of the incredibly archaic and conservative retention of forms and ways of doing things, but also this ongoing creativity and engagement with others and so on. So.
Yeah, and I think that radical kind of hybridity in magic is really important in understanding that magic is, although it's deeply conservative, it's also deeply radical. So it's making sure that both of those traditions are understood.
And that's I like that, because if we're talking about combining the very, very old with the very, very new, an example would be a living and practicing anarchist critic incorporating notions of kingship from
Yeah.
so that is, people kind of miss that. That's typologically perfect to the story of European magic, because that's what happened at every century. It was the accumulation of useful best ideas, and their blend with the existing stuff that we are pretty sure from experience knows that it works.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the spirit contact at the heart of that.
So I was teeing that up.
Yeah.
There's a quotation from the book which I like. Contact is the personal proof of witchcraft.
That
Yeah.
was probably you.
Yeah.
I think that was
Yeah.
when the premium members did the Grimoire course last year, or whenever that was. It was the same, and because I'm quite sure Julio will listen to this. When he does, it's the same position. It's just, look, do whatever you want. If you get the contact, I don't have a problem. If you don't get the contact, you have a manual you can keep to.
Yeah,
And I think
go back to the book.
that's how you put rigor back into it, and actually work out what does and doesn't need to be retained, either on a, quote, dare I say, universal basis, or at least on a you basis, you know. And I think people shortcut way too much and then go, oh, this doesn't work. I'm like, it does. It definitely does. Let's wind back and see where the but it's a personal proof, isn't it? What if you could just wiggle your nose like 60s, 70s TV and have something show up? If that works, do it.
I think magic is both an art and a science, and so you can't say it works if you just follow these processes, it will work. I don't think that quite holds.
No.
But equally, it's not just like the charismatic magician or exorcist who you have to have both. You have to have something you've developed yourself, and you have to have the rigorous approach, and you put those together. And that's the same actually for any art or any science, if you're really open. There has to be this radical openness to magic, because you're always engaging with something beyond yourself and the spirit world. So unless you do have that, and you have that rigorous approach to navigate through it, I think you're in dangerous waters.
Yeah. Funnily enough, the next part of the podcast is going to be about movement and embodying and dance. And as you say, that radical openness does need to be there for almost, dare we say, life, rather than just a practice of something. And so I wanted to start with a few definitions there, and we'll get to occulted body. But weirdly, as I was putting this stuff together, I'm like, well, wait a minute, what even dance? Like, do you have a personally satisfactory definition for dance before we get to more nuanced ideas around that term?
I ask myself that all the time. I'm always observing movements in people, in animals, in plants, in the way the wind moves through things, catches the sail or something. So I think that of dance is this unfurling of consciousness in movement.
Mm-hmm.
Whose consciousness, it's up for debate. It can change. And also, the nature of that movement, I think rhythm is fundamental to it. But even that is very flexible. There are many different ways to work with rhythm, or to work through or against rhythm. So there's a rhythmic component, and there's this component of a consciousness that manifests itself through movements, whatever they are.
I like that. It's bound enough.
Anything.
Yeah, because it's any of these kind of big ideas. If you try to, you'll just turn it into nothing. If you widen the definition out, it has to have a fence, or else it just turns into the whole universe. It can't be identical to movement. And as you say, rhythm would be a good differentiator, except when it isn't,
Yeah, a content, a consciousness, something distinct that you recognize or you feel. That could be something that manifests as an emotional response, or it's really hard to say, but yeah.
And there's something very particular about Buto, about Alkistis' dance. Probably you need to talk a little bit about Buto Fu and the
there's a with Buto particularly. I don't think this is untrue of dance generally, but with the methodologies that Hijikata developed for Buto, there's a very strong internal. I think this is true in actually Japanese. It's very true in No theater, and performances in the East in general, but there's a very strong internal component and an imaginative internal component. So you kind of build images and a world within which manifests through your body. So you kind of let that direct your movements rather than following a sort of an external stimulus or choreography. It kind of begins from within and works out.
That's good, because what I like about the unfurling of consciousness in movement is I was hoping for a definition that can include and also similarly frame the presence of dance outside the human, and because we're quite good at depicting joy, and or we're quite also good historically at depicting mating displays or something dull and mechanistic like that. But I also think like little baby goats jumping around in joy, or dolphins. Same thing. Like we can observe them satisfying your definition of dance for what would appear to be the emotion of the pleasure of it, or just the pleasure of it. But it does leave the door open for consciousness to unfurl in movement for whatever reasons these other entities would want to have. And I think I like that. I think that's a good... it puts us...
I think spirits enjoy dancing, especially with human bodies. And I see animals dancing all the time and enjoying being alive. So I don't think dance is something humans invented at all. Bees dance, birds dance, and consciously dance. And the mating dances are extravagant. They're not mechanistic. They're really,
No, but I meant...
It's costly. It's
19th century observations of it were that it was a mechanistic non-organism doing this to pass genetic material. I agree completely, I think. But that's kind of desire runs the universe idea.
Perhaps animals even feel emotions. What do you think, Gordon?
Oh, imagine that. I'm shocked. I'm shocked at the assertion. I wanted to talk about the non-human experience of dance because that kind of tees up really well a refrain that goes through the book of the occulted body. So now that we've done like the wide and challenging definition, let's do a slightly narrower yet still more, I guess, still a little challenging definition. What's the occulted body?
It's the body. It's the body, but I think people haven't seen it, so I call it the occulted body. It's a kind of play on that there are occult powers in the body, but also that it's been obscured so much by culture, well, not even by culture, by everything, by the fact that we put it aside and we have so much pain wound up in it, or all these things. So, and it's also the fact that we can't even see the body, because what we see is the outside of the body. We see the skin, and we don't even see all the skin. So what a body is what it is, right down to like the marrow, right into the depths of the body. And for me, every part of this is magical. I don't want to separate the subtle body from the physical body, because they're part of a continuum, and the subtle body is just emanating from the physical body, and the blood is made in the bones. So the blood, which has the same substance as the primordial ocean, it's the same amount of salt and things in it, is in our blood. So we are born of this ocean, and we came out of this ocean, and it's still in our bodies, and it's still making forms. It's making our bones, it's making our forms. So I'm fascinated by this play between the formlessness of the ocean and its ability to dream forms out of itself, and then we still carry this ocean around within us, as we are still we are 100% liquid crystals.
It's it's a marvelous way of kind of jarring people into sitting with how often do you, like a dolphin or a baby goat, move for pleasure, pure pleasure or joy. You move for sexual desire and so on, but how often do you picture the goat in the field, just be like, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm just going to get my freak on. I'm just going to bounce around and makes it and just randomly, it is so good to be a baby goat today. And how often do we? And that's not exactly what the occulted body is, but it's an interesting way of saying we are hidden. Yes, we are hidden from our body and what bodies are for.
We don't explore this. I think there's so much to learn here and to explore here, and everyone will have a different experience of it. Everybody's got a different body. Everybody's got a different history and heritage, ancestry within their bodies. So so much can be discovered through each individual person. I don't think you can systematize or formalize it particularly. There is a geometry that everybody shares because, our bodies do certain things. They have certain movements that are inherent, which is makes sense to be a form in this world, in this atmosphere. But apart from that, we are there's so much richness. Nature just creates and creates and creates, and there's so many different things to discover in each person's body. And that's very much individual journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the rigor in which that's sort of explored. So, as you say, people have historically looked for the universals in the wrong place. What physical exercises should everyone do? And I'm like, no. Yeah. But there is, and this is I think it's got to be an Alkistis quotation unless I've messed you up again. Here's another, I think, universal though, that there is no substitute for mental and physical exhaustion.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to, when you're dancing, or when you're doing anything, there's a point. It's actually, this is true for writing, as I've discovered more and more by being forced to do it. The more deeply you go into something, you get into a really strange altered state, and then you start you break through. You get beyond yourself, or beyond your sort of the first stage of yourself, which is where you say, no, I'm not sure, you're worried about, if it sounds okay. And then things just start to come out, and that's this occulted body beginning to speak. And to speak through language, to speak through movement, to speak through art. It's the thing that why artists and writers take drugs and get drunk all the time, because they need something to cut this out. But the other way to do that is just by dancing or moving to exhaustion. Long distance running, swimming, fighting, whatever. It's these are really good ways to get to that point where you quiet the mind and you just let yourself be, and whatever comes out.
Whatever comes out. This is a quotation from Fly the Light, which is one I had read before, and is a good example of revisiting and getting different and deeper things out of it. The realm of the flesh is the realm of the shadow. Mm. So it seems like it is the preeminent way into what we, in that kind of blended Jungian and magical space, refer to under the umbrella of shadow, which is a lot of things. But particularly for us right now, the realm of the flesh is the realm of the shadow. I mean, am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. And also one of the empowering things about centering the body, which is what we're constantly doing in our work and through the collection, is that it's the one magical tool that everyone has. So we're living in a world where people are in shared accommodation. They haven't got money. They haven't got resources. They can't afford a lion-skin belt. They can't afford ritual space. There are all these kind of barriers, between people and performing, particularly the higher forms of ritual magic. But everyone has a body, and everyone can move that body. And we're not saying that you have to move the body in a particular way, or you have to have a particular kind of body. In fact, if you look at the way that our ideas are and ideas of movement are, we're not looking at people, for example, who appear to have superficially powerful bodies, who go to the gym and perform a limited set of very linear exercises. Very often they're people who can't actually move, who don't have a quality of movement, but have simply been entrained through the machines that they're using in the gym. They don't actually know what it means to inhabit a body. And so hopefully the book will enable people to understand that they have this really powerful magical tool, and they can engage in this process of exploration of it, of innovation, of discovery.
And I wanted to add, just to reinforce what Peter's saying, that it's not even about being well, because I mean, my health is pretty precarious and I work through this. So it's often perceived that, I can't do this because I'm ill or I have this problem. But no, I think that the working through illness, working through disabilities, it's still just as valid. It's still your body. It's still the way you interact.
You aren't not doing it. That's the thing. Yeah, you don't until you actually die. You aren't not doing it. So the whole I can't do it. I'm like, you are. It's just that. There are ways that you could. There are probably ways that can be more fulfilling or revelatory for you, just in how one goes about existing in their life.
Yeah, it's not about being greatly able to do things, but just doing things. just having that experience, because the more you work with the body, the more you feel in it, the more you become attuned to kinesthetic sensations and the way you feel within, which is so tied to emotions. So it can be quite traumatic work, but it can equally be very, very much a release and very much empowering. And that's because it's initially difficult, because it's initially painful. I think people hold back from there, but my feeling is that you have to explore two things. Both you have to follow your pleasure and you have to follow your pain. You have to go into both of them as deeply as possible. And that way you don't like cut yourself off from one thing, but you embrace both the shadow and the light.
Absolutely. And that was, a great Jungian insight. I mean, imagine how horrible it must be to live a life exclusively on avoiding pain or exclusively on just seeking pleasure, like that, without any of the doing challenging or rewarding things. It just seems to be built into the universe. Has a pain component to it, and how you approach that pain is up to you, and illustrative if you haven't sat with how you approach or respond emotionally to pain. And it's not all. This is the thing. Like, it's not just pleasure and pain as well. Like, one of the other things that comes through in the book, for instance, is usually when we talk about increasing embodied work or what have you, everyone is hearing like, "Oh my god, I've got to get to the gym." Like, I get it. It's some sort of 80s aerobics montage, right? But I mean, there's some really fascinating additional grimoire stuff inevitably in the book. In goetic work, cannabis is an essential ally, and that's really fun. But I mean, should we talk about some of the other components that surface from, I guess, your reading of grimoires? Because there's some really cool kind of plant ally stuff that's in there that I think a lot of people have missed, and cannabis being an essential one, I think.
Yeah, the grimoires are just full of drugs. They're stuffed with drugs. I mean, you can't split drugs from magic and witchcraft. It's a modern impossibility.
I think the categorization of some things as drugs, it just puts it in this no category, but it's pharmakeia, it's health and healing as well. And
we were, when the Stifling Air is in there. That was a pretty early piece that was published in Howlings. We had a little bit of a revision of it. I mean, we revisioned a lot of the work when we went through it, but one of the first insights was clearly that there were psychoactive components in the incense that was being used in goetic ritual, and so that's something that we pursued, and we worked with a variety of the poisons on that, datura and henbane, and some of the more difficult spirits in terms of getting the contact,
or just in terms of sympathies with them, and the kind of work you might want to pursue with them.
So there is an entheogenic component to the grimoires, which isn't always talked about. I mean, there's been some very good work done on that. We picked up Liber 420, which is certainly a worth looking at. It's a bit of a sprawling book, and there are things that I disagree with in it, but his work on the particularly on the later experience leading into the Golden Dawn period, even of people using the solanator alkaloids, is really quite instructive, and cautionary as well, due to the number of people who went insane through using these mixes.
Yeah, that's very true. But we're embarking on our, we're growing up a little bit on our brewing and general alcohol manufacture, being careful what I say here at the moment. And you can kill yourself doing that too. You drink the wrong thing there and you can definitely, So, but that's, I mean, this is one of the things I kind of noticed, and it's sort of the one of the things I noticed reading Brazen Vessel is I've been there for the last 10 years in terms of aware of your stuff, but I got a survey, a 10,000-foot view of just how much witchcraft has grown up in the last decade. And we are talking about, for instance, you cannot, for whatever squeamish modern / 20th century reasons, separate out the presence of Pharmakeia from European grimoires. It doesn't mean you, particularly if you have addiction challenges that you're working through, it doesn't mean dive in, but it means you can't pretend they're not there. From a maturity perspective, they're there, and that's a thing that needs to be navigated. And the other one, inevitably, we mentioned praxis, is is the devil. Lucifer, Satan, and a really interesting quotation that you have in, I can't remember which essay at the moment, the quotations from Michelet in it, where Satan calls himself the archangel of legitimate rebellion. Elaborate on that, because that is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about Brazen is that it contains a lot of Lucifer material. So I know people are waiting excitedly for Praxis, which is being written, and I'm really excited about how that's going at the moment. But in Brazen, there are 10 years worth of Luciferian material and work that I've been doing around that ritual work, and various insights, looking at it from a grimoire position, looking at it from a witchcraft position. There is a huge continuity with that work, and I think reading Brazen gives you a sense of how Lucifer, witchcraft, Babalon, and Goetia, how these things are all actually tied up within our Western magical tradition, and that just hasn't really been brought out before. And Michelet is kind of critical of this idea of the rebellious Satan, because Satan is the spirit of rebellion, comes from our very earliest sources when we look at the fallen angel material, when we look at the Enochian material, when we go back to Atrahasis, when we go back to our earliest sources, then this is the spirit of rebellion, and that was recast. Obviously, when we get into later revolutionary periods, when Satan really emerges most powerfully, it's extremely late. I mean, when the Lucifer figure makes his final appearance, then we're into a period of revolution. We're into a period where it's left wing, it's anarchist, it's radical. It's to do with the execution of the monarchy, the death of kings, the sovereignty of the individual, and all of these kind of extremely radical ideas. And again, I have to point to the excellent work of Per Faxneld in Satanic Feminism, and also Children of Lucifer, which is another stunning book to look at in that regard. But this understanding of this radical figure, whether glyphed as Lucifer or glyphed as Satan, is a necessary corrective to the sort of shorthand Ayn Rand satanic ideas that we get through the LaVey material,
exactly,
which is really a historical aberration.
What's so perfect to me about the Archangel of Legitimate Rebellion is that it's structural. It's baked into the universe. Like, it is an eternal legitimate rebellion. Is I am the rebellion in the cosmos. I'm not, as you say, like a hiccup in post-war capitalism. I am the Archangel of Legitimate Rebellion, and that's something that if you don't. This is that sort of growing up of witchcraft. Like, it's all well and good. Everyone likes this aesthetic. It's all well and good to have like the horns and the agricultural skulls, but underneath that, upwelling from that is sort of almost like a structural archetype that is what this is. Is the practice of magic.
Yeah, and this hasn't always been a welcome realization. Although it's nice to look at Instagram and feel that witchcraft has now moved into a down with the devil, like skulls and horns thing. I mean, a lot of these talks we gave on the ground, talking to the existing neo-pagan community, and talking to people within the various witchcraft communities, and to put this material in front of them. I mean, people would routinely get up and storm out of talks when we
that happened to me this week. There you go. I'll tell you about it afterwards. But yeah, so that still goes on.
Yeah. So I mean, this is still a live thing. There's still a lot of work to be done with that. There's still a lot of change that's needed.
I think there's still a lot of dualism in the way people understand the devil.
Yes, but they simply haven't done the work, and it's not even a call to switch up anyone's actual personal relationship with the more than human world beyond. You have to sit with this. You have to sit with it and absorb it back into our current and understand what it is. It doesn't, as you say, like, people do seem to think you're gonna have everyone toddle off and become Levian Satanists. How awful! It's not that. It's an unavoidable thing to think with and through. It doesn't mean, hey, you all have to go off and do this. But that was what was so interesting to me reading the book and just thinking back on the last 10 years as to how much has changed and how much you guys have been part of that. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, I know. It's been an amazing journey. I mean, we really kind of, the last 10 years of magic and for everyone have been revolutionary. I mean, it's been such a radical change. When you see people saying, oh, I've been practicing magic for 25 years, well, I can guarantee that 15 of those years would have been bullshit, because in the last 10 years we've had such an explosion in terms of texts that are available, in terms of practice, in terms of the breaking down of groups, in terms of communication. I mean,
online discussion has probably
discussion has helped and hindered in various ways. So it's been a phenomenal journey, and I think for the people who've followed us on the journey, I mean, one of the nice things about producing Brazen is that, I mean, we traveled the world to bring this vision to people, but people haven't been with us all the way through it. I mean, people have seen glimpses of what we've been doing, and they've seen the bigger books. So, they'll have read The Red Goddess or Lucifer or AW, but this really kind of draws them all together and shows how the work that we've been doing is all massively interconnected, and it's interconnected with this wider change that's happening in magic and the journey that people have been going through in this process. So
I think one of the things, getting also back to the devil, that it became very clear to me through this book and bringing it together, was the connection. The devil isn't just like all that is bad or the rebellious or whatever, but it's also heresy. It is like what is not supposed to be said, all the alternatives. It's not one thing, it's many, many, many things. And I feel often that Scarlet has existed as a kind of heresy to orthodox occult narratives that were going on, especially when we appeared. And the figure of Babalon also represents something like this, because of the harlot in Revelation, and Lucifer the same, as the head of the fallen angels, or the figurehead that represents all of the fallen angels. So you have this heretical or Enochic tradition as well, that has been so much a part of knowledge, and so much a part of the knowledge that develops civilization and takes us forward, and not just occult, not just magic, but all aspects of culture. And so and we use Revelation to hold all this together, because all of the spirits that are figured in the grimoires anyway as fallen angels. So you see that in Revelation with the abominations of the earth, and you see the women that interact with these spirits as the harlots, or create them by intercourse with the angels. And under the figurehead of Babalon and also Lucifer, you see that they represent a huge tradition of knowledge that has been continually suppressed, initially by the church and or closed, and now by capitalism or modern, rationalist scientific
stuff. It's whatever the construct that's capitalism and patriarchy and all those kind of things are.
Whatever's trying to maintain control at any point in time. So very much working with these spirits and under these figureheads has been about reconnecting to those traditions of knowledge and taking them forward and reviving them and opening up these heresies for people, because I think that's the only way to go forward.
And showing that we actually have a tradition. I mean, the real change has occurred. I mean, there was a period before we started working of like creative occultism coming out of the works of Kenneth Grant in particular, which was largely just making shit up.
Because there wasn't the amount of material available.
Because there wasn't material, and people also weren't looking at the material. They were doing something different. I mean, there were good aspects to it in terms of like the emergence of artistic responses to the occult and trying to find a way forward. But the last 10 years have just been absolutely spectacular in terms of our access to material and our ability to read it, and our ability to escape from these earlier earlier responses, which when you look at them just kind of like disintegrate in your hands, which is kind of what the book ends with our look at eschatology, that many of the earlier models simply no longer hold.
Yeah. Absolutely. I always love Revelation talk. I'm completely with you on that, and I think that's a text, and I appreciate, especially as the listenership is obviously majority American, that there are a lot of people who've come through some really fucked up versions of churchianity, not even Christianity, as kids. So there's like a double hit for them, which is to return to potentially a trauma text and to revivify it. But I think that's essential work. The other one, and it's funny because if you look at the longer timelines, it's that other contact point that has mutually fascinated us, you guys more than me, obviously, but it's nevertheless there, is if we're talking about Lucifer and witchcraft and Alkistis, you're talking about harlots and mothers of abominations and Revelation. Here's a kind of interesting topic area to sort of close it off with. Like, why should everyone know we are the witchcraft?
Piece of you.
No, I was going to let you do that.
You.
And I guess the follow-up, because maybe Peter can start with that and Alkistis can do the next, which is, how should they encounter it? Like, if people are... Do you know what I mean? Like, why do we need to know that? Why is that one of the texts where it's almost like you get this flash of the layering going back to Sumer and wherever the stuff in Sumer came from, and into the contemporaneous practice of witchcraft in the quote-unquote West? It's this... there are flashes of... It's almost like a portal, is what I mean. You can get those multiple bits of time available in very few lines. It's probably my, like, why should everyone know we are the witchcraft?
Yeah, that's obviously reliant on Jack Parsons and his approach. His approach to the brick wall that he hit, which was the inability of Thelema to contain the goddess. So Jack came out with this radical vision and used this "we are the witchcraft" term, which is wonderfully inclusive, if slightly muddle-headed in the way that Jack expresses it, because of the time that he was in and the somewhat naive feminism that he espouses. But what it does is it puts power back in the hands of individuals, and in terms of empowering individual practice. It says that the witchcraft is within the body, that it's something that we find both within ourselves and also in community with others. So the core experience of witchcraft is this dissolution of self in the Sabbath and the breaking down of boundaries between self and other, and that experience of union with human and non-human entities, which is at the heart of magic.
And it's direct and unmediated. You don't have a priest standing between you. So between you and the divine or the daimonic, you just have your own self, your body, your psyche there in the situation. So,
and I guess sorry to interrupt, but my history note thing, the other thing that it gives me is, as Peter was just saying, like, it gives you back that tradition, like the opening lines date where it comes from. So it's empowering in the body, but it also, you kind of read through it, and all of a sudden you're not alone in a temporal sense. Like it gives you back that tradition, that it has always been there, and it's been a perceptual error for you today to have missed it. And I think that's why everyone should know it. I don't know. Sorry to interrupt there, because I thought if I let that bit go, which was the bit that was so important for me, was like, holy shit, there's a tradition.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it is a tradition. I mean, we have a tradition and we have the texts, and we're in an amazing period where we can actually get at them, and we can get the work out of them, and we can connect. And when we talk about the witchcraft, it is, this is formed by the bodies of everyone who's engaged in work, by the people who read and are inspired by it. I mean, we're very careful not to ever create cult or create personality cult around the work that we do, to stress that this is this is something that is being brought into existence by the work of like many hands, by the work of many bodies, by the work of many thoughts. And if our work helps inspire people in that, then that's a great thing. But we're all part of something much larger. We're at a critical point with the breakdown of many things in the world, in which this realization is becoming more and more important for people.
Mm. Alkistis, tell us about reciting Liber 49, because that was fascinating. That I've done similar things, just not as long as you have. But tell us about that, because that was cool, and that's one of the sort of recommendations for this material. But talk us through that.
Oh, that was very difficult. I did it again and again and again, and we were recording it so that I could hear it back and hear the voice. And it takes so long to peel away your personal thoughts. So I have done some acting work and some work with improvisation outside dance. Before I became a dancer, I was interested in that. And so I had some sort of idea how to approach it, but I was... it's really difficult. I don't know what to say. She starts with, yea, it is I. And you just have to be there immediately. There is no like talking yourself into it. So you have to just get it from the go. And then she's got you and it's already like full speed. So you're going, and then she changes direction, because it's quite an uneven piece in many ways. Because, well, anyway, whenever I've worked with her, I always find that she's very emotional, and the effect, for me, it feels, the effect through my body is that you get like jerked around a lot, you get moved a lot, you get thrown, it's almost like you physically can't bear it, and this comes through the voice as well. But so she has this dynamism which is, way above a human capacity. So to recite a text that has her voice, her energy running through it, even if it's through an imperfect medium, even in this like imperfect state, it's still like really, really physically demanding, and intellectually as well. And so there's so much resistance initially, and you have to just keep going over and over and over. It's a very interesting work to do, because what I started with, what the first recordings show, is quite different to what the later recordings show, and also each iteration of it, different nuances come out, and the voice breaks strangely, or the voice, or the pauses, all things are very. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting way to begin working with Babalon, because there aren't many texts, and for example in Thelema everything is supernal, or through a golden dawn sort of sympathy, not through a direct relation to the goddess. And so Thelema doesn't give you any leads to how to work with her. It just Libereth gives you the formula is to give up everything. Okay, right, okay, I can do that, but there's nothing, it doesn't take you any further than that. So I had to go into my body, into the voice, in order to make contact, and in order to allow her to physically transform me in those ways, and to allow myself to know through the body what it is she communicated.
There's a beautiful line in it, in this commingling of text and voice, the body was revealed. And like when I saw that, I'm like, the commingling of text and voice. I haven't done it with Liber 49, but I've done it with all-night sessions with orphikims and mushrooms, or orphikims and LSD, and commingling of text and voice. I'm like, that's what I'm looking for. It's me. It's getting the text in me, because you did it over. It wasn't just a one-off thing. It was an ongoing project, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I still repeat it. I still revisit that as a kind of part of my practice, because it's kind of part of the prayer, as well as bringing through texts. But yeah. It's very worth doing.
It is, and even just your description of you working specifically with the text that's important for you, which is Liber 49. I mean, it is an important text, but
it's just text. Yeah, you can do it with many texts, like you said, the Orphic hymns and so on.
Yeah, so that bit in the book was kind of like, I was looking for that sort of phrasing, commingling of text and voice, because there is something deeply powerful and I'm sort of interested in this. It was in a recent solo show, Ingold's research on how humans in Europe have historically read revealed in religious texts, and it was always more performative until we kind of had like a cosmology change, and it felt like that. It feels like that for me when you have that embodied, or it's the commingling of text and voice, because I don't want to keep using the word embodied, but performative gives it a shallowness that is not there. It's so important, and it was such a joy to read your visceral descriptions of what is an intense process when you do that.
I think when you put breath into it, it gives it life. So the Greek term would be ananosis. It's to give life again to the text. It becomes new. So it's both the same text it always was, but it's the text it is that moment that you're saying it as well. So in each time you speak it or perform it, to use a trendy word, it becomes possible to be fresh, for that incursion of the other to come through to you. And it's because you sacrifice your breath to it. So you give it life, and it gives you something in return. And that's the commingling for me.
Yeah, great stuff. The whole book is really good stuff. Obviously, I've been looking forward to this for a while, and it's almost full circle, because as we kind of discussed at the beginning, some of these were rereads for me, but it was a new and thoroughly new encounter, which is where we've ended the conversation. Maybe I'll read some of them out loud while high. I don't know. All right, guys. I know you are super busy, so all the contact details will be in the show notes. But what else have you got coming up? Please, Peter, give us more Praxis information, other books, other events you're appearing at, all that kind of thing.
So after a couple of really disruptive years, I'm back on the Praxis manuscript, and I'm probably 2/3 through the text. So obviously these things, you never know when you're writing. You never know quite what direction things are going to take, and how the process is going to continue to unfold. I mean, obviously, looking at Brazen gives a sense of the long view in terms of like the loose work I've been doing, and I encourage people to read that, because I won't be repeating that material in Praxis. But Praxis, I think, will probably be finished by the end of the year.
Awesome.
That's where it's looking at for me now.
Oh, we're speaking at Trans States.
We'll be speaking at Trans States, which is our next big kind of gig.
Yeah.
And I'll be talking about the Blood of the Saints, which is another.
It's something that we're going to be doing after Praxis.
Another text that I'm working on.
Oh, awesome!
So that's really exciting. We've got a ton of other books in process. We're working on
a new one by Peter Mark Adams, Mistai, on the female Dionysian mysteries, which is really wonderful text. Very awesome. New.
You've told me about that one a little bit offline. I'm looking forward to that. I absolutely loved Game of Saturn, so that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's going to be great. And that's being followed by
the excellent book
by Phil Al Cummins, which will be another really important addition to the grimoire canon. Yeah.
So exciting things coming.
Yeah, really exciting times.
Yeah, awesome. And of course, I will have the contact details and various socials in the show notes, unless there's additional ones. But we've got your Twitters, we got your Insta, we got the website.
Yep.
I think we're good.
Perfect.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much for this. Congratulations again on the book. I was super jealous and sad I wasn't there. They're literally in spirit. But it's a good work. It's really good stuff. So congrats and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, these ones are always lots of fun and also unsurprisingly thought-provoking. Included, on that note, I guess, included in the show notes for this episode is a video from last week's launch at Treadwell's in London, as well as details on the book, Brazen Vessel, and all the usual stuff you expect of show notes by now. And if any of that is indeed unexpected, it probably means you haven't subscribed yet. So you should. On YouTube, in your favorite podcatcher, on Spotify, on Alexa apparently, although I will literally never know personally if this is true. Find out more at runesoup.com and consider becoming a premium member. The existing members have voted on the course for this quarter, and it's the tarot, and I could not be more excited for it. So if that's your jam, this is the time to have a think about it. There's also a few tickets left for the Metaphysics of Desire workshop in New York in early September. Details on the blog and the event section of the Rune Soup Facebook page for that, as well as being the pinned tweet on my Twitter profile. And if you cannot find that by now, I have some concerns as to whether the workshop may even be right for you. Until next time.